Did you know in 1880, no you didn't, did you? But you will in a minute, you will in a minute, won't you, of course? Yes, way back in 1880, did you know that 11.5 million Christmas cards were sent in the United Kingdom? And as I told you the other day, this was all truly down to Victoria and Albert. They'd made Christmas fashionable. He'd imported many aspects of the German Christmas over here into the English Christmas. And suddenly, as I also said, that the penny black was coming around, and basically suddenly people could actually send Christmas cards. Of course, a lot of people, and I don't mean this rudely, but couldn't read or write, but it basically conveyed the message for them. Christmas cards were cheap, and many people decided that they in fact could make their own. So suddenly a boom industry of what we see today has now fully flourished. You see how this works. But what's fascinating about this is exactly how basically Christmas has evolved over here in the United Kingdom. And I don't know if you know this, but all of these spectacular lights that we now see up and down, of course, our wonderful towns and cities, from the very heart of Scotland right down to Devon, over of course into Ireland, all of that sort of stuff. Well, really, they were all instrumental from a Victorian era, right back to the illuminations at seaside right back, of course, to the illuminations at seaside resorts. But here's one thing that you won't know, and as ever, I wanted to share it with you. Morning, good to see you. Thank you so much as ever for joining me. I'm so glad, by the way, you enjoyed the recent video about Queen Victoria and of course Minnie Palmer, the driver who was the very first lady chauffeur, buying her own car, driving her own car. I mean, they talk about glass ceiling girls, right? It's all been done. You know, it's just all been done in one form or another. And I think these ladies truly were far braver because they were first really battling against, you know, a very harder way thing to get through with all the men in charge. It must have been incredible. As many people have said over the years, really, it was the First and Second World Wars that really basically proved that women can take on men in certain jobs and win. And boy, did they. It's a little bit like this particular story. By the way, can I just also bring this up? You know, there's a sort of story going around over here about the tree in Trafalgar Square, which is very kindly donated every year and has been for the last many, many years from Norway. And a lot of people are saying, oh, it's, you know, it's not very nice, it's this. The tree's kind of always been the same, let me point that out. It's, I think, the way it's been decorated. Literally no pizzazz, no nothing at all. But what could one expect from this particular council and this particular mayor? I'm sure you'll all agree. A lot more money will be spent on his own personal celebrations in a few weeks' time. You'll see where that budget goes, right? Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because if you came to London when you were very young and you went up and down the likes, of course, of Oxford Street in the 1960s, you will have delighted at all of those wonderful big stores that we had at the time, including the likes of Selfridges, of course, with their wonderful Christmas windows that really gave a heartwarming message about not just Christianity and the true meaning of Christmas, but the excitement of seeing train sets going round, Santa's grotto, all of that sort of stuff. But what you wouldn't have seen until, of course, 1959 was the fact that Oxford Street was adorned with wonderful twinkling Christmas lights. Now, you just think that's gone on forever, don't you? But I found a royal connection. You see, here's where it gets fascinating, because basically they decided that this was the story at least, that the Christmas lights in Oxford Street, Regent Street, all of those things, they couldn't risk putting them up across the street in case they either fell down in high winds, bad weather, and then caused something of an accident. Worried, of course, about being sued. And the Prime Minister of the time, Harold Macmillan, was very much against this, being a bit of a spendthrift himself. But then the shopkeepers said, no, we're quite happy. We'll donate, we'll put the money in. Wasn't good enough. Now, where this really changed around, and this is from an excellent source, was simply the fact that Her Majesty the Queen thought this would be a rather nice idea to cheer people up, particularly in the very still austere times of the 1950s. Suddenly, guess what? The Prime Minister jumped on board. Nothing like somebody more powerful, is there? Snapping that well-manicured regal finger, you get the picture. Now, pushing forward, basically, you know, she sort of intimated that, yes, the children would very much like to go and see these lights if they were to be put up. And that's the reason why Anne and Charles, at a very young age of course, went with their nanny up and down Oxford Street to view the lights. And this was very casually and very, easily leaked out to the media, simply because if it was safe and good enough for the royals, then it was safe and good enough for everybody else. And as I've often told you in these historical videos before, it's the royals that break it through, like Queen Victoria on the train, like King Edward literally endorsing the moving picture, the photography era. It's always about them, simply because of course people trusted them and thought, well, if they're willing to risk it, we should have a go too. So once again, one might suggest that it was Queen Elizabeth's very kind and sort of gentle movement, shall we say, in making sure that we still have at least some lights in Oxford Street today, albeit those that actually not one says Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas in a Christian country. Now, I don't think you'd approve of that, do you? Neil Sean in the very heart of London.